Iranian lawmakers have accused France of blackmail during talks on Tehran's nuclear program. Negotiations are at a crucial stage between Iran and six world powers. After a decade-long deadlock, there had been hope of a deal, but now negotiations appear to have hit a stumbling block. RT's Tessa Asilia is following the negotiations in Geneva.
From the very beginning, the skepticism really has been coming from France. In the beginning, they just said that Israel's concerns had to be taken into consideration if any agreement is indeed reached. We know Israel has been very uncomfortable with this, with Netanyahu, the premier of Israel, warning that this is a bad deal. However, right now, France has suggested that there are other conditions that must be met by Iran. One of its main concerns, for instance, is the process in establishing Iran's uranium enrichment. Another demand from France, has been suggested by the foreign minister, is the halting of the Iraq heavy water reaction. That's something Iran does not want to do. Now, aside from that, there are also words that were spoken by the foreign minister that might have insulted also the Iranians, because Laurent Fabius had said that France didn't want to be part of a con game and that the final draft text is too favorable to Iran. Now, the lawmakers of Iran had said that France really has been hindering these talks and have indeed been calling it blackmail. It hasn't gone unnoticed here in these talks that France has been really taking quite a hard line from the very beginning. Some observers saying that even a harder line than the US or the UK. One Western diplomat had told the Associated Press that in fact the conditions that France is demanding are harsher than those demanded by the US and other partners. Did hear words, for example, from the British Foreign Minister William Hague saying that they should seize the moment in order to reach a deal that had eluded the world for a long time. Those are quite positive words. We heard the U.S. Talking about narrowing gaps when it came to issues. Well, as it stands right now, the talks continue, and there are suggestions from the Iranian delegation that there could be a resumption of the talks in about 2 weeks' time.
And Robert Hane, a journalist and political analyst based in Strasbourg, says France's position on a deal is dictated by the interests of other players.
They seem to take an extreme position all the time, and there are a number of reasons for this. The first is that they are playing good cop, bad cop with the Americans. Obama is suddenly being much more reasonable in his attitude with the Iranians, and the French are out there on the flank saying, oh, you mustn't agree too easily, Israel must be protected, and so on. And in a sense, that's, if you like, playing the game of the Americans so that they can sound more reasonable, the French sound more unreasonable. There is another factor, which is that everybody knows the enormous pressure of the Israel lobby in America. It's not quite so well known that it's pretty considerable in France as well.
Well, earlier I spoke to Abbas Aslani. He's from Iran's Fars news agency, who said France is sabotaging a deal with Iran to score points in the region.
The news that we get from the diplomats, Western diplomats, is being said that France is opposing the deal which is going to happen among Iran and the P5+1. There are some analysis and some speculations on that why France is opposing this. One is that France has good relations with Israel. France helped Israel to complete building the nuclear plant of Dimona. On the other hand, France is having good relations with the Arab countries in the region. So in this case, Arab countries and Israel are opposing any deal with Iran. France can enjoy the difference between Israel and Arab countries with the US to strengthen its ties with those countries.
Now let's take a more detailed look at the deal negotiators have been trying to put together. First, according to some sources, the six world powers want Iran to halt all activities to enrich uranium at 20%. They could then permit enrichment at a level below weapons grade. In addition, Iran would be obliged to limit the number of centrifuges it uses. The demands also reportedly include more intrusive monitoring of Tehran's atomic facilities, and in return, world powers would unfreeze some of Iran's assets in foreign banks. Plus, the West would reportedly consider easing sanctions which have crippled the country's economy.